Hey folks, it's Fernando doing our video for the Modern Survivalist, and in this video I'd like to address and explain the possibility of the thermohaline circulation shutdown. And if this sounds like Chinese, you're probably not alone. Maybe you don't even know what this means. Maybe you've heard about it but not quite understood what it involves. And this is probably where I was. I knew that it was something that could happen, and before I even waste any more of your time, this is one of those black swan type of events. Very rare, but if it does happen, it could have some very drastic consequences for the entire planet. So because of that, where I'm coming from in terms of modern survivalism, I'm not going to be going nuts over it, but I do want to understand what all this is about in case I see some of these things going down. So let's get started. Basically here you have a map showing the currents, the ocean currents moving around, all right? The water in our oceans is moving around, and here we see the warmer currents, the surface currents moving northwards along the eastern coast of the United States, and then splitting here, going to Europe, cooling down, and then coming back down. Right? Actually, this is shown a little bit better here in this other map. And this book, by the way, is actually pretty good if you come across it. Modern School Atlas. It has some great maps. Lots of interesting data. This is something that I've used for my own book, which I'm going to be showing later. Here you see the Gulf Stream, currents moving up, and then here going towards Europe, the North Atlantic Drift, right, moves up, and this is credited. It's not the only factor, but it is credited with warming Europe significantly more than other areas at the same altitude. Here you have at the same latitude. Here you have in Canada, and you have in Europe, as you see, much colder temperatures than in Europe. Right? This is why it's called the heat conveyor belt, because it moves up, cools down, and then comes back down. And it's important to understand how this works. Most scientists, based on what I've read, agree on the following explanation. Why is this happening? Well, it's happening because of temperature and salinity. The salinity of water that you have. Basically what happens, and this is like if we cut diagonally along the Atlantic, right, you have the waters here, you have the South Atlantic and the North Atlantic. In North Atlantic, of course, you have much colder temperatures. You have also very strong winds. So with those strong winds comes more evaporation, and as that water evaporates, it becomes more, the salinity increases, and being colder, it's also heavier. It sinks more than warmer water. So what happens is that this cold, high salinity water sinks. Right? If we have the south here and the north here, this colder, more saline water sinks, and this warmer water moves on top of it. All right, it just sinks like that, and this one comes on top, creating that circulation that we have there. All right, this creates, and this is of course going to be surface water, the warmer water that moves on top of the colder one. This is why this is the surface water moving along, and this is the cooler water moving back south, replacing it as it keeps moving on. Now, what's apparently happening, and this is one of the things that scientists do agree on, is that this current is slowing down. At least in the North Atlantic, the North Atlantic Drift is slowing down quite a bit. Even by the most conservative estimations, since 2005, it has slowed down even 30% or more, depending on the research that is being read. So 30% of a slowdown in the last 10 years or so, that is quite significant. So how concerning is this? Well, this is where scientists sort of disagree. Some say that it's going to be very drastic, some say that it's not going to be nearly as bad, and some even say that because of global warming, the global warming is going to be more than upsetting that, and you're going to be having even warmer climates in Europe and overall. You know, one thing that I do find interesting is that going back to my approach to things, my approach to survival in general, one of the questions that I've always told you guys to ask, and I ask myself, is Has this happened before? How did it happen? That's the kind of thing that I'd like to learn. And it's interesting to notice that several researchers have found some very interesting data. For example, in a lake in Ireland, one of the studies made was like cutting different layers of the bottom of a lake, the different mud layers. And one of the things discovered was that about 12,000 years ago, there was what is called a Younger Dryas stadial event. This is a sudden lowering of temperature. About in one of those layers of mud, it's like very thin, like half a centimeter layer of mud. They found that temperatures just dropped, froze everything all of a sudden. Not a matter of years, but a matter of months. All right, in just a matter of months, the entire area, the entire region froze over. Ireland and of course Great Britain was all thrown in Arctic climatic conditions. Life pretty much ended there in just a matter of months. And one of the explanations for this happening apparently was that there was where you have right now the Great Lakes in North America and Canada. There used to be one massive lake, and a natural dam broke in the eastern coast, and all the water from this lake, all that fresh water, when the dam broke, poured into the North Atlantic, of course reducing the salinity of water, pretty much stopping the thermohaline circulation. And because of that, this is believed to have been the cause of that stadial event, of that what we've seen like in that movie, the Day After Tomorrow type of event, where in just a very short period of time everything freezes over. Well, that's something that has happened before. Sure, it happened 12,000 years ago. It could happen again, yes. I think that it's interesting to notice a few things. This is slowing down, definitely. Now, at the same time, on a more positive note, you're not seeing such drastic climatic changes. You're seeing some things happening here and there, but it's not nearly as drastic as a Younger Dryas stadial event. So I think that's important to understand the mechanics of how this works and understand that it has happened, could happen again, not very likely, and at least from what we're seeing right now, it's not really nearly that bad. But if you do see certain things taking place, like much worse winters and very low average temperatures throughout the year, maybe there's a little bit more to that, and maybe you should start looking into things a little bit better. At the same time, it's also important to notice that this does not mean that the entire planet has colder temperatures, because some guys in Florida will be saying, wow, that's something that I could definitely use. It would be nice to have 4 seasons. We're boiling over here. Well, another important aspect of survivalism is that when things go down, they don't go down exactly how you'd like them to happen. This shutting down or slowing down does not mean that you're going to be having colder temperatures here. It may actually be the opposite, because of this current if this starts moving upwards, maybe you're not going to be having that colder water moving down, and you're going to be stuck with this hot water here, and it's not going to be going through the North Atlantic Drift. This means that maybe you will have even more warm temperatures, even more deserted temperatures. You're not going to be having that evaporation that takes place here in the North Atlantic. So maybe there's going to be more droughts overall, lack of water, more heat than you already have. So it's not as if everything cools down conveniently. Maybe that here you're going to be boiling, you're going to be having even worse summers, even less water, and here you're going to be freezing. And something that I did notice in South America, at least, you are seeing a little bit of a climate change in some things. I've noticed that climates in Argentina are definitely more tropical than they were maybe 10 years ago. Summers, those plus 100 degrees summer days, they're happening more and more. They're becoming far more frequent than they used to be. If I had to make a guess, I'm not very much of a fan of that, but I'd say that it's that we're seeing a natural cycle of climatic change, as it always happened, because one thing that no one argues is that climate does change. We've had other ice ages and mini ice ages, and this is very natural. It's just that it happens in hundreds or tens of thousands of years, and we're not used to seeing that sort of thing. So it is something that's probably very natural, but we're just simply not very used to it. So a little bit of information to keep in mind. Maybe more concerning, since we're already here in this book, which I think it's actually quite good, is if you are located in the Ring of Fire. Folks here in the western coast in California, this is something that pretty much all scientists agree that the big one, the big earthquake that's going to be massive, is going to be hitting the western coast of the United States in the next 20 to 30 years. That's something that all scientists pretty much agree on, and if they all agree on, and it's going to be happening in the next 20, 30 years, you really should be addressing it. You really should be taking care of it. Folks, all these things, as drastic as they sound, it's not to scare anyone, it's just to be well informed and know how to prepare best based on where you are, the things that you're likely to come across. And here, basic preparedness goes a long way. What I mean by this is that having your supply of food, water, medical supplies, emergency kits in terms of flashlights, a means of defending yourself as well. All that stuff that we always talk about comes into play here. It's going to be helping you in a personal disaster. It's going to be helping you in a flood, in a fire. It's going to be helping you if you have a number of possible disasters or emergencies, and here it's going to be helping you as well. Also, part of any well-rounded preparedness plans is having a plan so as to get out of there if you have to do that, which is the stuff that I use this book for in my own book, Bugging Out and Relocating. And as the title says, what to do when staying is not an option. All right, this is extremely important, because sometimes just staying put will not help you in any way. All right, if I am stuck here in Europe during a younger Dryas Stadial event and everything freezes over, I definitely have to get out of there. And this is stuff that I've addressed many times in my books and in my videos. You have to have the option of bugging out, moving somewhere else, even maybe leaving the country, even leaving the entire continent if it's called upon to that. Same thing here. If you are in the West Coast and you have a massive earthquake that destroys everything, probably you want to be going to some other state, even within the United States, but a place where it's not hit by an awful disaster. Right now you're seeing these problems with water with lack of water in California. And you have a basic understanding that if you have water stored, you're not going to be the guy that's suffering if you're going to be going without water for a few days. Now, if you have to go without water for a few months or a few years, then it is this type of situation that staying is no longer an option and you have to move somewhere else. So folks, lots of possibilities, lots of things that could happen, but as always, preparedness does go a very long way in giving you a lot of peace of mind. Folks, that's going to be all for now. Remember to subscribe, share the video if you did like it. Take care, have a great day. See you on our next video.